in the process of going live.
Hello, world.
Ooh,
Redirecting to YouTube. Here we are live.
wow.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Wagtail Review. Sage's epic jingle. It's good
It
to have you here, Sage. Welcome, Megan. I think, Megan, this is your first appearance in the
is
Wagtail
my
Review.
first appearance on the Wagtail Review. This is great.
Wow.
And if
Welcome.
anybody's curious, I am not doing Cyclops cosplay here. I'm wearing these because I have chronic migraine. So that's why I'm rocking the glasses, y'all.
It's 10 points for the swag as well as, self-care. Definitely good. Um, yeah, for this week, we don't have a jingle apparently, but we do have a good topic. We've just shipped Wagtail 7.3. Megan wrote a lovely blog post. We have an amazing video overview of the release. And one of the key features is autosave, which people have been clamoring for, which we're super happy to have, and which I guess we're ready to answer a few questions and maybe dive into the implementation a bit. What's our plan?
Well, I was actually wondering if we could just take a moment just to marvel at the feature that is autosave in general. Like, I was thinking this week, like, it feels like it's taken us a while to do this, but I've started to appreciate kind of like the amount of hardware and software upgrades that were necessary to make these types of features exist. Like, because people who are like Sage's age or younger have not existed in a world where saving is a thing. They
Well, I
don't
still I
like.
still remember the diskette symbol at least.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You at least remember that. But there's so many, like my nephews are not gonna know what a floppy disk is. They're not gonna know what is this saving that you did back in the day, oh ancient ones.
What happens if you lose power?
What happens if you lose power? Yes, while your CD drive is busy writing on the disk for like 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's just that I think most content creators have some epic story out there about work that they've lost or something that has made them cry, honestly, due to a saving accident. Um, like for me, it was I finished a epic novel when I was in high school, and that's when I got the sad Mac. It was bad, y'all. It was bad.
oh.
Do you guys have any bad memories of saving incidents?
Honestly, like it happens more often than you'd think. I think, like in my code editor, sometimes I start a project without having set it up for versioning in Git just yet, and like you can easily spend 2, 3 hours, not realize later on that you've RMRF'd, like removed the whole folder, and then hate yourself for it. Like, just 3 hours of like blissful focus disappearing. Um, in Wagtail, not as much, but still often enough. I write articles while I'm on the train, and then you try and save, and poof. What about you, Sage?
I think I have had cases of either losing my flash drive or it suddenly not working or it getting a virus back in the day when Windows didn't have as good of an antivirus. So these days I tend to be more, I don't know, I'm more of a data hoarder. So I'd rather have as many copies as I could than lose my work. So yeah, I have like lots of Git branches as like checkpoints for my work, even though I never actually touched them after that. So yeah.
I'm super happy that this is coming to the CMS, to be honest, because in the context of Wagtail, like it does disrupt my writing flow a bit if I have to manually hit save very, very often. It's just nice that you can stop worrying about it and just like check the indicator and see that it's worked. Do you have a demo for us, Sage?
Oh, yeah, we can have a quick demo, I guess.
That'd be great.
All right, 1 second. Let me show you. All right, I have this little page in my bakery demo, but it's a simple page, so it's very bare bones at this point. But let's say I want to edit the title. Hello world. Ooh, look at that. Did you see that? Changes have been autosaved. Ooh. So if I were to open this in a new tab, you'll see that, oh, that has indeed that has been saved. So even if I close this, I know that even if I didn't click save, it's already saved.
You can't quite believe it, can you? You're like, let's refresh anyway and check that it worked.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and also it's like so much effort went into a feature that people are going to appreciate for like the first few times it appears, and then they're going to forget about it. Which is honestly, when you think about it, is like when you think about the best software you have in your life, like that is a big part of it. It's the experience of just not worrying about things, like having things work well in the background.
Yeah, and
Ye-
this was not a feature that we just worked in this release. It has been a journey. So we built previous features that would end up powering this autosave because we have to consider things like conflicting edits and like how to communicate such um, conflicts to the user and what they should do in those cases. Because again, um, keep in mind that this is still what we call an MVP because there are a few limitations that um, we haven't been able to solve because of the data model and also just well it's a lot of work to get it done, so we're doing it iteratively over the releases that we've um, made. So yeah, it's built on top of previous features that you might have seen that may not be like a big deal back then before autosave, but we'll see how they play out. So yeah, I do have a little presentation here, but before we get into that, do we want to talk more about autosave or should I just jump into this?
I think it would be great if we could go through, I don't know how much your presentation covers this, but some of those features, we could explain them a bit more because I think when people think of autosave, it's definitely easy to forget and move on. But in Wagtail, for us to implement this, there was a lot of nuance that we had to spend time getting right enough to feel happy enough to ship this. Maybe you could show like concurrent editing notifications. It was quite a big piece for us, I recall.
Yep.
Yeah, we started this all the way back when we started introducing stimulus to the project, right? That was, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yes, we added stimulus like 2 years ago now, maybe, and we used that to build features like concurrent editing notifications. But let me see if I can show you. I'm not sure if it's um, well, yeah, this little thing when there are conflicts like this. Well, I'll get to more details in the presentation, but um, yeah, if you wanted a live demo, I guess we could do a demo on the nightly site, maybe. Do you have it open, Tibo?
I can try and make that happen.
Well, I'm not sure if I have a separate user account here. Oh, I do actually, but I forgot the password, so maybe you
I'm
could repeat.
logged in, Sage.
Okay, let's open this welcome to Wagtail page and see what
Think.
happens.
Let me find it? Obviously, we want the English version, right?
Yep.
Je parle français, and my German is not up to par. So.
Same here. I only know Ich spreche kein Deutsch.
Ta-da! Where are we? Which page are we on? Welcome to Wagtail. I'll join with the same account just to save a bit of time. I feel like yeah, you mentioned stimulus, but I feel like even before that, we introduced comments inside the CMS. When was that? Uh, at least 5 years ago now, I think we had the comments feature. It was kind of like the first step of us to, I guess, wanting to facilitate like live collaboration inside the editor. Because when we say like journey to autosave, really what we'd like to build eventually is something that multiple people can look at and edit at the same time. I don't know how far we are from that, but certainly closer than we've ever been before. Can I leave you a comment, Sage?
I think so, but I'll have to reload. Have you added it?
I think I've added it.
Uh, Look at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, so this eventually, like, we want it to look like, I guess, the type of interface where you see who's looking at the page at the same time. We already have that. And also you see where they might be looking on the page. And also you see if they might be making edits and comments like this. Right now it does rely on one of the two sides manually reloading to see the updates. But yeah, I guess Sage, to your point about this being complex, I do feel like also it's definitely because of our philosophy on product releases, or always wanting to make those things happen iteratively and compatible for a wide range of projects. You know, Wagtail being so opinionated, there's already lots of minefields to support things as it is, but we like to make it extra hard on ourselves by also trying to make those features available to arbitrary Django models. I think autosave already works for snippets as well, right?
Yeah,
Oh, look, here I am.
there we go.
Consultant experts, auto-saved. Yeah, and so with something like this, like you get something that's pretty unique, I think, in the Django world, where obviously you have an admin interface, just like Django's, but out of the box, you have support for multiple, like a revision history of the content, like a live and draft version, and a preview as well of your arbitrary model.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
We pretend we didn't see that.
Well, I also tried to create myself an. I was logged into admin too, and I'm like, oh, I should make myself another user, and I must have fat fingered my password. So,
Uh-oh.
whoops.
Are there any limitations, Sage, on like what type of existing model you could set this up on? Is it like maybe our lack of support for UUID primary keys for snippets, and that's about it?
So even that is technically supported, but we haven't guaranteed that there's nothing broken because we haven't got a like comprehensive tests for such models. But in principle, we try to support it. So and we address any issues as people report them. But other than that, for the autosave in particular, the only requirement is for the model to have the revision mixin enabled because we need to tell if there are any conflicting changes to prevent people from overwriting uh, changes from one another. And to do that, we have to track the revision that they're editing. So that's a requirement if you want to have autosave. We could technically enable it without revision mixin enabled, but Yeah, that could mean you might end up overwriting the work, the changes made by other people.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
we're not at the point where it's live editing where you immediately see changes made by other people. Because that's yeah, quite the work. I think the main blocker might be ideally such features would be implemented with something like WebSockets, so that we're not doing a constant request response cycle, um, with basic HTTP stuff. But that means we impose the requirements of having things like Django channels onto the users of Wagtail, which for some people they might not need it. So it's one of those considerations that we have to keep in mind.
Makes a lot of sense. I could definitely see ourselves moving towards that in the future. But there's a big but, which is that I don't see ourselves necessarily breaking compatibility for anyone who doesn't want to change their project that drastically. So then that would mean having different levels of support depending on your site's configuration, I assume.
Yeah, and that means we have to make sure that everything keeps working regardless of how your site is set up. And yeah, it's quite the
Those
work.
smooth upgrades. Megan, you've upgraded the Wagtail.org site to the latest release recently. How is it like between smooth sailing and super stressful?
Honestly, this one was pretty smooth sailing. And the only friction I had for this upgrade was making sure that everything worked with I did the Python version change as well in this upgrade. So, but autosave pretty much like granted I didn't attempt to do anything fancy with it. So wagtail.org mostly like most of our activity is in the blog area. We don't do a ton with a lot of unique snippets. That might change when I start working on the Wagtail Space website later this year.
Ooh.
But we'll see how that goes.
Teaser right there.
Yes, yes.
I see we have quite a few people in the chat. Good to see you here, Srishti and Joel and Amit. Definitely, if you have any questions, do feel free to go for it. Otherwise, I think we'll just keep chit-chatting. Um, Sage, do you think we're gonna work on like a new version of this in the near future then, or is it more like a year from now? What's the next step, like in terms
Um,
of UX and features?
I think we'll definitely do some refinements in the next release, small tweaks here and there that um, we know we should improve. But also at the same time, we're still waiting for feedback from people who have tried out the new release. So yeah, keep that feedback coming, and we'll iterate on this in future releases.
And it doesn't have to just be developers. Like we want to hear from editors too.
Oh,
I mean, I'm sure some people are curious about what we're going to do with the save button in the future. So,
yes. There is an issue on our backlog which is called save and continue, I think. And I would love more editor feedback because I'll be honest, like we have lots of developers here. We definitely have lots of feedback from devs, not enough feedback from CMS users.
well, and
Um,
I'm one of the ones who pushes for the save and continue thing because
do you wanna
you
pitch for it?
well, basically it's like when you finish a blog, um, I think most people, when they put a blog live and publish it, realize 2 seconds later there was a typo or something they needed to change. And in Wagtail, it takes you back when you publish, it takes you back to the parent page and the listing there. And it's just like, but I need to fix my typo. And then it's a few more clicks to get back in. I think a lot of other content programs just stay on the page just because it's pretty typical with any sort of internet publishing to have to make a quick change or another good example is when I do the release blog post. I almost always have a placeholder link in place for some of the release notes, just because we don't have the stable version published yet when I write it. And that's like, just extra clicks to get back in and be like, hey, I need to update this link. So
Yeah.
that's my pitch for save and continue. I
I
would
think
love
I
to
have
see that.
I have the same pitch. And I think it's also simply because when I publish a page, it's really rare that I'm like, okay, I'll make a new page elsewhere then. Like I don't like publish five or even two pages in a row. So it's like not like it's gonna help me in any way for me to go elsewhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are probably a few circumstances in which that would be useful, like if you're setting up a new site or if you're migrating a bunch of content and having to create new pages for it. But like honestly, I think most people want to stay on the page when they publish it.
Yeah. So this is one if we looked at our backlog for the project that is marked as needs user research, because there's definitely been plenty enough like discussions back and forth over the years that now it's at the point where it'd be nice to have more like input from actual CMS users. Um, Having said that, definitely when we move to the autosave world, I assume that at some point, even if we were to not make a conscious decision, if you hit publish, you'd rather have that happen without a page refresh, at which point it's pretty natural to not change where users are looking. Um, so yeah, I think that will be an interesting one if we can wrap this into the next round of user testing of the autosave feature specifically, or if people have feedback about this in its relation with autosave.
Well, should we dive into the inner workings of this feature that y'all have worked so hard on?
I guess so.
Because I like people just honestly don't think about this a whole lot. And when you do think about it, you realize how awesome it is actually that it exists.
That's true. All right, should I start then?
Go.
All right. So yeah, autosave. We're finally here, right? So yes, usually before autosave, you would have to click save this little, well, not little. It's a big green button at the bottom, and when you click save, it it does the normal form submission, standard browser stuff. It will send a post request, and if the form is valid, then the server will create a new revision with the changes. Otherwise, it will add errors to the form and render the edit view template and return it as the response. Though in the case if you're publishing, um, we are redirecting to the listing page, which we might change in the future as we just discussed. So yeah, that's manual save, right? But with autosave, as the user make edits, we wait until they make no further edits, and after that, we send an async post request using JavaScript. And if that form in the post request is valid, we create a new revision with the changes and we return the ID as the response. But otherwise, we reject the request and we return an error message instead. And we want to display this little indicator in the header saying that the changes have been autosaved. So yeah, it makes it clear to the user that they don't need to worry about the changes being lost. That was the first autosave. But for subsequent autosaves, um, we want the client or like the browser, when it sends the post request, we want them to include the revision ID from the previous autosave. And if the form is valid, we want the server, instead of creating a new revision, we want to overwrite the previous autosave revision with the new data. So this means we're going to keep using the one new revision that we made for the whole autosave session. So this avoids, making one new revision for every single autosave call, which isn't ideal because usually it's still the same editing session, right? So it makes sense to just keep reusing the same revision object. And yeah, the challenges in implementing this feature. The first thing that is very important is edits by different session because we don't want users to overwrite changes made by other users without them knowing about it or like explicitly confirming that. Because again, like we said, we don't yet have that live editing collaborative kind of like Google Docs style because of the limitations. But maybe we'll get to it at some point in the future. So for now, we have to consider this conflict resolution. And we want to communicate the state to the user. So there are UI components to update after an autosave has happened. And we want to integrate with existing features that we built previously, like previews and concurrent editing notifications. And also, we want to make it configurable. So, for example, things like how often is an autosave performed, just in case, maybe people run Wagtail on a either maybe it's a busy site or maybe they run run it on a VM with limited resources. So we don't want to spam the server with too many requests in a short time. So we want to make things like the interval configurable. And then also about updating the UI. Previously, we have always relied on the fact that we do a full page reload, which means the whole view template is rendered by Django, and we can rely on that for any UI updates. But this time, we have to kind of patch the view that is already loaded at runtime in the browser. So, yeah, let's look at the first challenge with conflicts. So, this is the happy path, right? We
Oh God.
as a client, we load the page with revision ID 123, let's say, and then we make edits, and the server will create a new revision, um, and it returns the ID 124. That's the new revision, right? And then we set that as the override revision ID, and then if we make further edits, well, the server is just going to overwrite that previous revision, and yeah, just repeat for more autosaves. This is the happy path. But now, what happens if there's a different client, like a different user, and let's say they both loaded the same page at the same time? So at the time when they loaded the page, the revision ID that was loaded are the same. It's let's say X123, with X being like it was made by any user. We don't care about it, but it was this revision X123, right? And then client A make edits. So okay, the server will create a new revision A124 because it's made by client A, right? And yeah, this is the previous autosave flow normal, right? But what happens if the after user A has made autosave, what happens if client B tries to make edits? What should the server do? Any guesses?
Oh goodness. Hmm.
I love how you start with the happy path, which is usually, the case that's meant to be simple for us to implement. And even that isn't simple. And then you hit us with this. Is this a trick question, Sage?
Well, not really, because we've already shown you that little warning in the header. So yeah, the server should reject because,
Yeah.
well, client B when they try to make a change, the revision that they loaded 123, that's no
Mm,
longer the latest revision, right? So they haven't seen the changes made by
that's true.
client A. So yeah, in this case, for client B, autosave is turned off because, but if they want to overwrite changes made by A, they can, but there will be a confirmation dialog saying, "Hey, do you want to override?" Because client A, like user, this other user has made edits, and it doesn't have to be a different user. It could be you on a different tab. So that's something we have to consider as
I
well.
have done that to myself before.
Yeah, it's very common because sometimes you might have multiple tabs open, so we have to consider that as well. So yeah, in this case for client B they can't do autosave, but for client A, since they're currently like holding the autosave key basically, right? So they can continue autosave.
You saying key makes me think of like, it's a video game object being passed back and forth
Yeah.
between player A and player B.
That's kind of the idea. I think that's a good way to think about it because that's kind of how it works. Yeah, and now we have a different example here. Um, so in this case, let's say client A has made autosaves, right? Just like previous. But in this case, there's a new client, client C. They loaded the page after the autosave has happened from client A, right? And then they try to make edits. Well, in this case, client C is holding the latest version of the page, so the server should be like, okay, they know that they're editing the latest version, so there are no new changes that they haven't seen, right? So the server will happily create a new revision. In this case, C125. So client C will use that as their autosave revision. But what happens to client A if they try to make further edits?
Well, using our original analogy, they don't have the key anymore. The key has been passed to player C. And so the server should say, "You don't have the key. You shall not pass."
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, that's pretty much an easy way to think about it. So in this case, for client A, autosave will be turned off. And they could forcefully override the changes, but they have to explicitly confirm that because we don't want the override to happen silently. And yeah, for client C, they can continue to edit and autosave because they're still holding the key. And this is a different but a bit similar example of a conflict. So let's say client A is currently holding the autosave key, and then client C loaded the page, but client A make further edits after client C has loaded the page. So, well, the server is like, well, client A is still holding the key because client C hasn't made an autosave here. So the server will override um, the revision from A, right? But now, what happens if client C tries to make edits? Well, in this case, even though the latest revision ID is still A124, the revision that was loaded by client C is no longer the latest in the sense of like the content of that revision. So we don't only compare the ID, but we also have to compare. In this case, we look at the timestamp because, well, yeah, the revision that was loaded by C has been updated since it was loaded. So in this case, client A still holds the key, while client C, um, they can't do autosave. So yeah, that's those are the examples of the conflicts that we have to consider when we implemented this feature.
Yeah, how many of these, like, I don't know, it feels like wargaming almost. Like, are these just like a couple of the examples that you guys had to think about?
I basically had a spreadsheet of like all the possible states, and I had to consider, okay, is this basically the same situation as that previous scenario? And if so, I could kind of, okay, I'll just consider them like the same. I consolidate them both into a single scenario. But so these are the three main scenarios. But there are more like specifics um, in the differences, but I think these are the three main scenarios that are likely to happen.
Yeah. what tends to introduce complexity as well is if there's some nuance between doing this for existing pages versus new pages,
Mm.
Oh,
and also pages versus snippets. That adds extra fun.
yeah,
I have a hypothetical, Sage.
yeah.
Um, all those conflicts I think would be resolved if we allowed different people to work on different drafts at the same time. Did we consider that? Like, oh, this person gets this revision, that person gets that revision, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, but who gets the latest one if you were to reload the page? Which revision is loaded?
I don't have a good answer for this. It's just we do have people on a semi-regular basis telling us like, oh, I'd like to, when I'm working on my own drafts, I'd like to be my drafts to be private to just myself until I decide to share it with my colleague.
Hmm.
And also like, oh, sometimes you're working on a long-term update to a page, but you also have like a quick edit to get in last minute on the existing live version. So we definitely have enough use cases where people would find it convenient to have separate drafts. But usually those people feel very able to, request those enhancements without solving what happens as to what draft displays when you come to the page detail.
That sounds like you're asking for a Git branch for for Wagtail, but not
Yeah.
Well, and
concurrency.
I'm trying to think of like, I've worked with a lot of content tools over the years, and I don't know of one that honestly would work like that. Because that's essentially a save as. And most people I know would do, copy the whole thing and make a new draft that way and just label it differently. Um, I mean, I think that would be an interesting approach if there was a way to switch between versions without making multiple copies of a page. It would certainly help with library cleanup uh, a lot. Um, but I don't know how that, if y'all can think of a genius way to make it happen, that could be interesting.
I think
Something.
it's technically possible. So you would tell the server to write a specific revision instead, right? But I think for such a feature to be exposed to the user, we have to think of a really good UI to communicate that, like which version exactly are you working
Yeah,
with?
exactly. Because like I think with especially with these autosave tools coming around, I remember probably one of the biggest implementations early on was Dropbox. Was pretty well known amongst most lay users. But I remember I worked at I had a contract with IBM for a while, and all the time people were like, "Which version are you working with?" And it was just like impossible to tell sometimes. So it's you have to think about that because that can easily lead to a lot of confusion.
Srishti in the chat says if we had a toggle to disable autosave, at least you could keep your draft to yourself until you're ready to save it to the server, um, which does feel interesting. I think also, as Megan said, you could copy the page and also you could work on the draft outside the CMS, I assume, worst case. Did you consider making it possible to turn this off, Sage?
Um, yeah, but it's not a user facing thing. It's configured from the server.
Ooh,
So if you
configuration. Who gets to decide what, when?
This
Oh.
is why, if there are editors out there, you should always be friends with your developers.
Do you think we should, this is the kind of configuration that editors would like, Megan? If you could, inside the CMS, say like, okay, I'm switching off auto saving for now.
I don't honestly know that there are a lot of people who do content writing who would use that. I'm open to a bunch of other people proving me wrong, but I think most people would prefer to just have it constantly on. Um, and use other means for keeping their own private drafts. Um, I mean, it probably would be interesting if there was a way to make kind of a user, like a user configurable private folder within the CMS or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, that would probably be an interesting way to solve those types of things. But I don't think I definitely would not switch autosave off. I'm too bad about remembering to save anyway.
Yeah. And that's good for us because those existing conflict scenarios, as we support more and more configuration options, the number of scenarios to consider bubbles up really fast.
Although to be honest, I think it should be, well, I'm not sure about the future, but at this point, if we were to add config like a user configuration option for autosave, it is fairly trivial to implement because of stimulus, which we'll get to.
Let us more.
Yes, tell us more.
All right. Yeah, so I'm showing you a screenshot of the concurrent editing notifications introduction that we did in What's New in Wagtail. This was probably a year or two ago now at this point. But yeah, back then we had this little feature that just tells you if someone else has saved a new version. And back then, it it's a nice feature, but you didn't feel as much of a benefit from it until you have autosave in place. Um, but yeah, so we added that as we said, we work on this feature like iteratively. So this was one of the building blocks that we had to implement before we get autosave. So concurrent editing notifications. Yeah, the way this works is basically we ping the server periodically to check for other sessions that are editing the same page and whether there's a new revision for that page. And by the way, when I say page, this could also apply with snippets that have revisions enabled. And yeah, if there are any other users editing the same page, we want to show those users in the header, kind of like Google Docs style. And if there's a new revision, we want to intercept any save actions when you click on the save button at the bottom to show a confirmation dialog. So yeah, this like you save a new version in another window if it was you who saved that new version, or if it were someone else, then we'll show that person's name. And the ping interval is configurable, and it can be completely turned off because, again, for some people, maybe they don't need this uh, to ping it to ping the server like every few seconds, and they would rather have it turned off. So we cannot expect that this like warning, this notification to happen before an autosave attempt because maybe the interval, let's say if it's configured to be 1 minute between pings and the user tries to do a save before the ping has happened, then they will not get this notification. So we can't rely on this as it is for autosave. We'll get to how it's how we integrate with that feature later. But so yeah, things to consider for communicating the autosave state to the user um, is this little unsaved edits message that we've always had since I don't know it for many years now. um, but yeah, this might not be that relevant once we have autosave, right? Because well, the changes should be saved ideally. So this we should never see this in an ideal world. And also the ability to render error messages. This is something that we don't yet have because we for the most part the UI in Wagtail is rendered using Django templates, which means we have to pass it on a request response cycle to render the messages. And if we use autosave, that means we have to dynamically add those error messages from JavaScript, and ideally in a way that doesn't interrupt the user flow. Like, for example, let's say you just added a new block in the page. You don't want to immediately be shown a big error right on top of the field because, well, you just added it. So yeah, we don't have that at this point, but we'll look into implementing uh, dynamic error rendering in the future, and also things like things that are kind of related and already existing features like previews, which also already checks for changes in the form, and then this little confirmation dialog that it's standard browser thing, but we do need some JavaScript to trigger that, and it's implemented with this unsaved controller. And session controller is the thing that shows you this concurrent editing information. And soon we'll have autosave controller. Well, soon is now because 7.3 has been released. And yeah, the name controller that is a standard that we use for stimulus because it's each of these are implemented as stimulus controllers. So I don't know if we want to be very technical today, but yeah, the first one is showing this unsaved thing at the bottom and also showing this browser confirmation dialog, right? This is implemented with unsaved controller. And previously, this for this feature, we detect change and key up events as well as a mutation observer because when you add a stream field block, it doesn't trigger a change or key up event. So we have to instead check for any new elements. That's why we used mutation observer. But for 7.3, we decided to simplify this mechanism to just use an interval to check for any changes to the form data in between the previous check. And when there are changes, this controller will dispatch this W unsaved add event. And if you happen to undo the changes, it will dispatch this clear event to hide the message. And these events are listened to by a different controller to dynamically add this message at the bottom. We render this in the server using template elements, so it's not immediately visible, but when we actually need it, we will clone the element to the right place. And yeah, this browser confirmation dialog, it will depend on whether you currently have unsaved changes or not. And then we have preview controller, which previously it has its own code to track the form changes using an interval. And this was implemented before the unsaved controller dispatches events for when there are unsaved changes. So yeah, it also it's something to consider. Like if you look into Wagtail's code base, you might be like, hey, isn't this sort of thing already implemented in that other place? But usually it's also because, well, they were implemented before we had this, like, for example, before we adopted stimulus. So it was a bit difficult to share um, the code and like how they interact with each other. But now that we have stimulus, I was able to move the logic that we previously had for preview controller and use that for unsafe controller. The logic where it uses an interval to check between. Uh, so, periodically it will check the form if there are any changes since the last check. So yeah, and then instead of doing the check itself, the preview controller now just listens to the events from the unsafe controller. So if there are any unsafe changes by the add event from unsafe controller, we mark the preview data as stale, so that okay, it's that means the preview needs updating. Because there are also things to consider, like what happens if you made changes while the preview panel is closed. You don't want to immediately update the preview because that's not needed, right? This is a sort of performance optimization. So yeah, instead of immediately updating the preview, we just mark it as stale so that the next time you open the preview panel, we'll update it. Or if you have it already open, we do update it. So yeah, another thing to consider when implementing things like this. And then the next thing is the session controller, which is the one that's responsible for concurrent editing notifications. The way that this controller works is it dispatches a ping event at an interval, and then the event is handled by a different controller. It's called swap controller that actually sends the ping request. So the session controller itself doesn't do the ping. We use a separate controller because excuse me because we also need to update the UI, and we already have this controller that we use in other places. For example, for universal listings, we use swap controller to dynamically update the listings as you do a search or a filter. It basically works by, fetching, sending a request to the server, and the result is inserted into the HTML, kind of like HTMX, um, but we have our own implementation basically. Um, and one of the reasons why we have our own implementation is because it allows us to specifically tune when exactly the HTML is loaded. Because, for example, for elements like this, it's interactive. Like you can use mouse to hover on it, or if you use keyboard, you can tab on these avatars, which will show you more information about who this user is and what they are doing. Like for example, whether they have made a new version, or whether they're just editing, or whether they're just currently viewing. And if you're
That's
still, yeah,
that's why we have our own implementation.
well, not really, not the reason why, but since we have our
It's a
own
benefit.
implementation, yeah, we can fine tune that thing.
I see. Yes, yes.
Yeah, we can. For example, before swapping the HTML, we wait for the user to tab out of this element to make sure that we don't interrupt their current interactivity.
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time reviewing HTMX behavior when you replace something that the user is focused inside of, and it's not pretty by default. So definitely, for most projects out there, the HTMX version would be just fine, I would assume. But for us, where the components are um, meant to be interactive, like it's really crucial. Thank you, Sage, for preserving keyboard users' experience.
Well, it's not just keyboard, by the way, because you also have to consider hovering on the mouse, and you don't want it
Um,
to flicker as the ping happens. So, yeah, I mean, by focusing on these like accessibility concerns, we also improve the experience for everyone, basically. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah, this session controller also has to send the information about the currently loaded revision ID and whether there are any unsafe changes in the current form. Because if there are any unsafe changes, this will be used to indicate that your session has um, it is currently editing, right? So for other users, your avatar will be displayed with an orange border. So that's why we also include the unsafe changes information. And yeah, we also have other stimulus controllers under the hood that help with how this is implemented. For example, we have the action controller and dialogue controller to, for example, to show the warning dialogue and to do what we call a forceful reload, because um, we have our own dialog to notify the user if they want to reload the page anyway to see the new changes. And in that case, we want to bypass the browser confirmation dialog. So, yeah, we have other controllers to help with that. Also, things like beacons, for example, when you switch to a different tab so that your session doesn't show up anymore because you've basically left the page, right? um, since if you haven't made any edits, we'll want to remove your avatar from there. So yeah, we use the action controller for other helper things. And
Do
finally,
we
hang on, yeah,
do we actually use the beacon API?
yeah, we do.
Wow.
Yeah, and right now I think it could use some improvements because right now we immediately remove your avatar from the indicator, but maybe we could use it to, let's say, wait for a few seconds or minutes and show your avatar as like grayed out or like inactive, kind of like Google Docs when you're inactive on the page until before we actually remove it.
So quick question, what is the Beacon API?
It's a browser API for doing something when you switch to a different tab or when you close the tab.
Ah,
So just before um, you close it, we can send a request, but in a sense that you don't care what happens to the request, like whether it fails or what it returns. You just want to send that request, which is useful for things like this.
gotcha.
And it makes me super happy because that's the type of thing where we spent a lot of time, I assume, trying to figure out what's the most like grain of the web way to implement something. And we found the Beacon API and it's perfect for the job and we use it. Like we're always looking ahead at web standards that are a bit recent like this and seeing, oh, could we use it for this feature like in a few years? Yes or no? And it's very fun to me.
Yeah, and I love that I think we strike the balance between, you know, not just supporting the very latest version of the browser, but still adopting new features as we um, drop support for older browsers. So yeah, yeah, and finally we have autosave controller. So how does this thing work? So we want to listen to events from the unsaved controller, um, and then we want to prevent the fact that by default it would show that you have unsaved changes message at the bottom, right? Um, so instead of displaying that message, we want to prevent that, and we send a post request to the server. But we also have to consider that not all of the edit views in Wagtail have autosave because, as we said before, for autosave we have to have revisions enabled for the model because otherwise we can't prevent conflicts. But since we have refactored the editing interface to be similar across all models, which means you might be editing a model that doesn't have revisions, like you're editing the site settings, maybe, or a user setting. But yeah, we do use the same code for the editor because we don't want to duplicate that, right? But that means we have to optionally enable autosave, and this is made easy by Stimulus because the configuration can be written declaratively as data attributes. So when we are in Django templates, we just add this conditional if autosave enabled, which is a flag that is set from the view based on whether the model has revisions enabled. Yeah, and if it's not enabled, we don't add those event listeners. So yeah, this autosave controller, um, uh, in addition to listening to events from unsaved controller, it dispatches its own events like save when it tries to save, success when the save was successful, error when an error happens, And in the case of conflicts, it will be deactivated, so it will dispatch an deactivated event. And not all of these events are actually used by ourselves. But when I implemented this, I thought custom code, like um, maybe you're interested in writing a package and you want to handle um, something specific to your package when these things happen. So I dispatch these events so that you can listen to it and handle it accordingly. And then, yeah, if there is an autosave error event, this will be handled by the messages controller at the footer. To instead of saying that you have unsafe changes, we try to be more specific about the message. In this case, autosave is paused, and we display the reason underneath it. For example, in this case, there are validation errors. And since at the moment we are not able to render the message immediately, we just tell you uh, click save if you want to see the errors. But this will also be the place where, let's say, there are conflicts. This will also tell you. Um, so yeah, this replaces the message that uh, you would normally see, which is this you have unsaved edits thing.
Sage, you just dropped the bombshell right there. You have to click save still. What do you mean? I thought it was auto
Yeah,
save.
I know that's one of the reasons why we call this autosave MVP internally, because there are still some limitations that are technically challenging to address. But instead of holding on from releasing the feature until we get everything perfect, we thought we've come to a point where it's already useful, and we'd like you to have it as soon as possible so that you can benefit from it and give us feedback on how to improve it.
On that note, I definitely expect we have to change our roadmap around this because right now our roadmap says we're working towards autosave. But to be honest, what we've done here already feels like a really decent implementation of autosave. So we really need to change our framing towards concurrent editing, I assume. And autosave, I feel like everyone can get by needing it. It's really beneficial for lots of scenarios, no matter how you use the CMS. Concurrent editing, I think we all like it, but fewer people actually need it. So it'll be really helpful to hear from people like specific reasons why they might want this or that concurrent editing feature in the CMS. But I assume in the meantime, validation errors appearing on without you having to hit save is kind of a logical next step, no?
I
Or is
think
it?
so. Yeah. If another thing to consider is it's also similar to the thing with the concurrent editing, where we have to be mindful where the user is currently interacting on the page, because we don't want to show the message when you know let's say they just added a new
Yes.
block. Yeah, so things like those interactivity thing.
It's so grating. I
Yeah,
have just typed into a field and already the system is like, value is wrong, please fix. Oh.
yeah, minimum length is 20, and then you just typed something, please wait.
Just leave me 2 seconds to breathe.
Yeah, like don't the validation errors pounce on you. That would be no, no, not good.
Yeah, so I think when we implement that, we want to make sure the experience is great. So yeah, instead of releasing it with like not so great experience, we settled on this compromise where okay, you still have to click save. But if you already know what the error is and you just continue fixing it, this is where we make use of the unsaved clear event. So if the autosave success event happens, we dispatch the unsaved clear to remove this message. So yeah, in the case where you can fix it yourself, we you don't have to click save. You can still do autosave. Yeah, and this is the B side of the autosave controller. Um, so if you look at this screenshot of the code, we put the autosave controller on the form element to actually do the form submission, right? But we also have this indicator at the top, and that is
Stage.
outside of the form. And I could technically implement this as a separate controller, but still, since it's still kind of related to autosave, well, it is. It's not kind of. It is related actually. So yeah, I decided to just use the same controller, but we only use the methods that are necessary to update the indicator. And in this case, so it might look a bit funny because so we have this autosave controller on this
Sage.
disk. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to disappear before we dive deeper into the B side.
Okay.
Um, please don't have too much fun without me.
Yeah, of course. That's I'll try to, but you know,
We're gonna have all the fun, T-Boat. You're gonna totally regret leaving. That's just the way it is.
No.
but this will be
I,
recorded, right? You'll be able to access it later.
yes, we are very much live right now. It's good to see you both, and thank you for such a thorough deep dive. I will watch the rest when I'm back.
All right. Thanks, Stevo. See you.
See you.
All right. Yeah. So as I was saying, this looks a bit funny because we have our controller here, but we're also listening to the same controller, but on a different place um, in the document. So yeah, we look for or we listen to events dispatched from autosave in the form. Sorry. Uh, yeah, when there is a save event that's success. Sorry, when there's a save event, and then when it's successful, or if there's an error, we listen to these events and we update the indicator. This means we can update like the icon and the tooltips as well. And another thing to consider is what other things might need to updating when there's a successful autosave. So, for example, um, you want to update the revision ID in the main editor form so that um, you know the autosave knows that you're now holding the latest revision because when you loaded it, it was a different revision, right? So after you have made a successful autosave, we need to update those IDs. And then also, yeah, when there is an autosave deactivated event because there is a newer revision, we want to forcefully do a ping on the session controller so that the concurrent editing notifications, so that uh, yeah, the notification at the top immediately shows up, even if the setting on the server has been disabled. So, yeah, this is one of those things where it's nice to have stimulus because it's easy to configure. And even if the ping interval was disabled, we can still um, make use of the controller to do a ping based on events instead of intervals. Oh yeah, sorry, I just talked about this, but yeah, stimulus again because things are declared in the HTML using data attributes, which means we can use Django templates logic to conditionally add certain controllers or um, setting these like data attributes for the interval that is connected to Django settings like Wagtail autosave interval. And event listeners can be added or removed conditionally using data action attribute. So yeah, it's a nice thing to have stimulus. I think I really have to credit LB here for championing our use
Oh
of
yeah.
stimulus.
Yeah, we absolutely I that was L one of LB's first RFPs for us, which is request for proposal, by the way, for folks who don't
Request for
understand that part.
comments. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's a very good RFC. I think they well, LB really detailed like why did we
oh yeah.
choose stimulus instead of these other options, and like why it's a good fit for us, and I think it's been a very good investment for us. So yeah, I'm happy. And
Yeah,
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 LB is just a
LB is
superhero.
amazing. Yeah, I one thing that I don't think a lot of people think of who just use the software every day from a content creation side is like how much work goes into not only thinking about making the user experience very well, but also making the experience great for people who are building on top of it as well. Like there's really a lot of thought that's gone into this, and this is incredible, Sage.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and Stimulus makes it easy because it's very oriented around events. So when I when we work with Stimulus, so we dispatch events to communicate with other parts of our code base, but that also means you as developers who want to extend or like do something when Wagtail is doing something, it makes it very easy to hook into those events. So yeah, Stimulus W.
Yeah, major W. We're gonna make LB really smile with that.
Yeah, there's some more parts I can talk about, but it's
We are getting a little bit
overtime maybe.
over time here. So
Right.
I was
Yeah.
thinking maybe we can answer a couple questions that came up from a user we had in GitHub.
Yep, sure.
Um,
I think
yeah.
yeah, we I might go into these details at some point later, but yeah, I can also share the slides later. But yeah, I'm happy to answer those questions, Megan.
Yeah, yeah, let me go find it over here. We have a user who asked is there a auto cleanup with auto save? In other words, once a version is published, will the auto save versions get cleared out from the history? Now, I think you may have you showed us how the revisions work, but what is the cleanup process? Is there a cleanup process?
So there really isn't a cleanup process, but we kind of prevent the fact that we're creating too many revisions by making sure that we are using the same revision for the whole session. So it's essentially just the same as saving, clicking save. But in this case, it might even result in fewer revisions because normally, you know, as you make progress, if you're afraid of losing your work, you end up clicking save, which creates a new revision, and then you make more edits, click save again, another revision. But with autosave, you're just reusing that same revision for the whole session. So yeah, we don't really do a cleanup in that sense, but we prevent making too many revisions.
Yeah, and that might actually help out with if anybody's ever tried to create a fixtures file for Wagtail or Django before, it is a chore. And revisions in Wagtail tends to make that even more complex.
Yeah,
So
because you
honestly,
have,
autosave might help in that department.
yeah, because once you have so many revisions, well, yeah, if you don't remember to purge your old revisions, they will stick around, which for some cases, you might actually do want to keep track of all those revisions, even the old ones, because you care about the history. So, yeah,
All right, and then the other question he had here, will pages with mandatory missing fields save the ones that are being edited, even if the page normally wouldn't save when I hit save draft because some of the fields were missing? So this is the question around validation.
that's a great question. So, it actually is related to a previous feature that I think we shipped either in the last release or the one before, but it's not too long ago, which is deferred validation on required fields. So yeah, for if you're saving a draft and not publishing, we now have the ability to defer any required fields validation. So you can leave those blanks without having to, yeah. So if you want to save, you don't have to fill them out. Although I have to say, we do have one limitation that we're hoping to address in the next release, which is um, for required fields in stream field blocks. We have not handled that yet. So it will prevent you from doing an autosave, but as soon as you type something in, autosave can resume. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's something we're hoping to address in the next release.
Gotcha, gotcha. And like deferred validation, like I don't think that they're like the only kind of mandatory thing that I think is like you need to have some sort of title or slug
Title,
involved.
yeah, and slug,
Um,
and although usually slug is filled as you
yeah,
type in the title. So
yeah,
yeah, but
exactly.
title is necessary for pages.
Yeah, because otherwise, like I think deferred validation can be configured somewhat by the developer. Um,
Yeah,
so
there might be certain fields that you like absolutely require, and developers can configure those. But by default, um, text fields, there if they are required, we don't require them for drafts.
So if someone does like put in that hard stop as a developer, just because they want to really make sure, will that pause the autosave then in this experience?
So um, it will pause autosave, but it doesn't deactivate it. So
Yeah.
if you fill that in, autosave will continue. But otherwise, we'll tell you there's a validation error.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we covered that scenario too,
Yeah,
because I suspect that might be what our user here is asking about.
yeah,
So awesome. I'm gonna just I opened up the chat, which is why you probably heard some brief noise earlier.
that's all right.
Um, I don't see any questions lingering in here, so this might be it for our autosave deep dive, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much for hanging out.
Yeah, this is awesome. Let's do this again.
Yeah, we usually do this every Friday, but usually in the morning. And whenever we do, we announce it in the water cooler Slack channel, I believe, and also on our socials. So yeah, if you follow our socials on Fostodon and where else?
Faucedon, Blue
Blue Sky.
Sky. We're also on YouTube. You can also, we're generally pretty good about updating Reddit as well. So.
That's great.